What if the most famous temple in Cambodia was only the surface of a much deeper secret? Beneath Angkor Wat's towers was a water empire so powerful it reshaped the jungle, and so fragile it may have helped destroy itself. Before sunrise, Angkor does not look real. The sky is still dark. Mist moves above the moat. The forest breathes around the stone. Then, little by little, 5 ancient towers appear against the first pale light, like mountains from a forgotten world. For a moment, it feels as if the earth itself is remembering something it has tried to keep secret. This is Angkor Wat, one of the greatest monuments ever built by human hands. But a monument is too small a word for a place like this. Angkor Wat feels like a doorway. Behind it was once a civilization that did not simply survive in the jungle. It learned the jungle's rhythm, shaped its water, fed its people, and turned faith into stone. Welcome to English Mindwave. Before we go further, please subscribe to support the channel and help keep these stories alive. Your support truly gives this channel the energy to continue creating deeper stories for you. Many travelers arrive at Angkor Wat expecting beauty. They find it. But if they listen closely, they may feel something stranger. Everything here seems to ask one quiet question. How did a civilization create something so vata in the middle of a difficult tropical world? The answer is not found only in stone. It is found in water. Water filled the moats. Water fed the rice fields. Water moved through canals like blood through a living body. Water helped the Khmer Empire rise, expand, and dream on a scale almost beyond imagination. But the same force that gave Angkor life may also have revealed its weakness. To understand Angkor, we must understand the kind of power that created it. The Khmer Empire rose in the 9th century and became one of the strongest civilizations in mainland Southeast Asia. From the heart of Cambodia, its influence touched much of mainland Southeast Asia, but its strength was not measured only by territory. It was measured by the ability to turn land, belief, labor, and imagination into one great order. At the center of this order stood the king. In Angkor, kingship carried sacred meaning. The ruler was not only a political figure with soldiers and borders. He stood between the human world and the divine world. His power was meant to reflect the order of the universe itself. That is why Khmer kings built temples with such seriousness. These were not decorative projects. They were statements carved in stone. A temple could say what an army could not say forever: that this ruler had a place in the cosmic design, and that his kingdom was protected by sacred forces. This vision reached one of its greatest forms under King Suryavarman II in the 12th century. He did not want to create only another royal temple. He wanted to build a universe. Angkor Wat was dedicated to Vishnu, and its design carried the language of Hindu cosmology. The 5 towers rose like the peaks of Mount Meru the sacred mountain believed to stand at the center of existence. The surrounding moat suggested the cosmic ocean. The rising levels of the temple guided the body and mind upward, as if every step moved from ordinary life toward the realm of the gods. Even its westward orientation feels mysterious. Most Khmer temples faced east, toward sunrise. Angkor Wat faced west, a direction often connected with Vishnu, the setting sun, death, and the world beyond life. So Angkor Wat was faith turned into geometry. It was kingship turned into landscape. It was a human attempt to make the invisible order of the universe visible. And yet, beneath that sacred vision, the empire still needed something earthly to survive: food, workers, seasons, and water. A sacred vision, no matter how beautiful, could not feed a city by itself. Angkor stood in a land of extremes. For part of the year, the monsoon arrived with overwhelming power. Rain filled rivers, softened soil, and turned fields green. Then the dry season came, and the same land could become thirsty and uncertain. In such a place, survival depended on memory, planning, labor, and patience. This is where Angkor's true genius appears. Behind the towers and carvings was a vast water system, almost like a hidden body beneath the skin of the empire. Reservoirs held the rains. Canals carried water across the land. Moats protected sacred spaces and helped stabilize the ground. Ponds and embankments shaped the movement of water through fields and settlements. The Khmer people did not simply live beside water. They studied its moods. Their genius was not in defeating nature, but in listening to it long enough to build with its rhythm. They learned when water rose, when it disappeared, where it collected, and how it could be guided. And this relationship gave the empire its strength. Rice fed the people. The people supported the temples. The temples supported the sacred image of the king. The king organized labor, land, ritual, and power. Everything was connected. Angkor was built by a cycle of water and rice, faith and authority, ordinary work and extraordinary ambition. The beauty people see today was made possible by thousands of unseen lives. Farmers in wet fields, workers clearing canals, engineers reading the land, and families living near waterways. The empire was not only in the towers, it was in the hands that kept the water moving. Modern technology has helped reveal how enormous this world really was. What once seemed like temples scattered in the jungle now appears to have been part of a vast urban landscape, with roads, canals, reservoirs, ponds, and settlements spread across a huge area. So Angkor was not merely built in nature, it redesigned nature. But the larger the system became, the more it depended on balance. Water had to be stored, moved, repaired, and respected. A canal blocked by silt, a reservoir damaged by flood, or a long dry season could disturb more than agriculture. It could disturb the confidence of an entire civilization. The same water that made Angkor powerful also made its power delicate. And when a civilization becomes delicate, its decline rarely begins with a single collapse. It begins with pressure. Angkor did not fall in one dramatic moment. There was no simple final scene where the city suddenly disappeared and the jungle swallowed everything. Its weakening was slower and more human than that, like a stone wall developing cracks no one notices, until rain begins to enter. By the 14th and 15th centuries, the Khmer world was facing pressure from many directions. Neighboring Thai kingdoms were becoming stronger. Military conflict placed stress on the old political center. Royal authority was less stable than before. Trade patterns were changing as river and maritime routes became more important. Then, religious life was also shifting, as Theravada Buddhism grew deeper across the region. None of these forces alone explains everything. But together, they created a world in which Angkor's old system became harder to hold. The landscape itself may have joined the crisis. Long droughts could reduce the water that fields and reservoirs depended on. Intense monsoon floods could damage canals and channels. A water system built with genius still needed constant repair. It needed labor, coordination, and political confidence. When those things weakened, even a brilliant machine could begin to fail. This is what makes Angkor's decline so powerful. It was not simply the end of a city. It was the moment when human ambition met the limits of control. The empire had organized water for centuries, but water was never truly obedient. It could be guided, stored, honored, and studied, but it could not be owned. As Angkor weakened, power gradually moved away from the old temple city toward places closer to the Mekong River and active trade routes. The center shifted. The world changed. The city that had once seemed like the heart of the universe became quieter. But Angkor Wat did not die. Buddhist monks continued to care for it. Local communities remembered it. Pilgrims still came. The temple remained sacred, even as the political empire around it faded. This detail matters deeply, because Angkor was not simply lost to the people of Cambodia. What faded was not memory itself, but the outside world's understanding of the civilization that had created it. And so the jungle did not erase Angkor. It covered the old city gently, like a secret, waiting for human memory to become patient enough to read it again. When the world finally began to read Angkor again, it did not find a dead place. It found a memory still breathing. Today, Angkor Wat stands between the ancient and the living. It belongs to a distant empire, but it is not only a relic. It is still a sacred site. Monks still walk through its corridors. Visitors still lower their voices when they enter. Cambodians still see it not just as stone, but as a symbol of who they are and what their ancestors were able to imagine. That is why Angkor Wat appears on Cambodia's flag. It is more than architecture. It is continuity, memory, and proof that a people can still find strength in what survived. Angkor Wat does not say that power lasts forever. It does not say that beauty protects a civilization from change. It says something quieter and maybe truer. Human greatness is fragile, but it is not meaningless. The kings are gone. The old capital changed. Some canals dried. Some roads disappeared beneath roots and soil. But the towers still rise, and the morning light still touches the stone, as if time itself has paused for one gentle second. A city can fall. A system can break. A royal dream can fade into silence. But wonder can survive. In the end, Angkor Wat is a story about the human dream to create order in a world that never fully stops changing. The Khmer people looked at a difficult landscape of rain, heat, forest, and dry seasons, and they did not simply accept it as it was. They studied it. They shaped it. They turned water into food, food into power, power into architecture, and architecture into memory. But Angkor also reminds us that every great system has limits. A civilization can be brilliant and still be vulnerable. Water can be guided for a season, but not owned forever. Nature can be shaped with wisdom, but not conquered with pride. Time can be honored in stone, but never stopped by it. That is the deeper lesson Angkor leaves behind. In our own lives, we also try to control everything. We plan our future, protect our work, build our identity, and hope that our efforts will last. Dreams need structure. Growth needs discipline. But Angkor teaches us to build with humility. It teaches us to respect the systems we depend on, whether they are nature, family, health, community, or inner peace. If we ignore the foundation, even our greatest achievements can become fragile. So maybe the question is not, how can we control life completely? Maybe the better question is, how can we build something meaningful while remembering that life will always change? Angkor Wat survived not because it controlled everything, but because it left behind wonder, memory, and meaning. What do you think matters more, building something impressive or building something that can survive time? Please share your thoughts in the comments so everyone can learn from each other's perspective. And if this story helped you see history in a deeper way, please subscribe to support English Mindwave and help this channel continue creating more meaningful stories for you.